Last summer, my girlfriend Emma and I decided to escape the hustle and bustle of city life and spend a week in a secluded cabin by Lake Crescent in Washington State's Olympic National Park. We'd been together for 3 years, and this was our first real getaway. The idea of disconnecting from everything and everyone sounded like the perfect way to reconnect with each other. The drive from the nearest town took nearly an hour, winding through dense forest that seemed to swallow the narrow dirt road. As we ventured deeper, the trees closed in around us, their shadows casting an almost oppressive gloom. The sounds of civilization faded away, replaced by the rustling of leaves and the distant calls of unseen birds. When we finally arrived, the cabin appeared as if it had sprung from the forest itself, rustic and worn, with a large wooden deck overlooking the dark, glimmering lake. There was something almost eerie about the place, as if it had been untouched for years. The cabin's weathered exterior and the surrounding silence gave me a strange, unsettled feeling. But Emma, with her adventurous spirit, seemed enchanted. "It's perfect," she said, her eyes wide with excitement. We spent the first day exploring the area. Hiking through the dense woods, we followed trails that seemed to grow narrower and more overgrown the farther we went. The forest was beautiful, but had an unsettling stillness. At one point, we stumbled upon an old abandoned campsite. The remnants of a tent, now tattered and moss-covered, and a rusted-out campfire ring gave the impression that whoever had camped here had left in a hurry. Undeterred, we returned to the cabin and decided to paddle out onto the lake in an old rowboat we found tied to the dock. The water was crystal clear, but deep and dark, and as we floated, I could see shadows moving beneath us. Emma laughed as she trailed her fingers in the water, but there was a nervous edge to it that I couldn't shake off. "Probably just fish," she said, though her smile faltered slightly. In the evenings, we cooked simple meals together, enjoying the novelty of the cabin's wood-burning stove. One night, as the sun set, casting a blood-red glow over the lake, we grilled fresh fish we had caught earlier in the day. Sitting on the deck, wrapped in a blanket and sipping wine, we watched the stars appear one by one. It was a perfect moment, but I couldn't ignore the feeling of being watched. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled, and I found myself glancing over my shoulder more than once. I told Emma how much she meant to me, trying to focus on the positive, and she smiled, her eyes reflecting the starlight, and said she felt the same way. One day, we decided to hike to a nearby waterfall that a local had told us about. The trail was steep and rocky, shrouded in mist, and the dense forest seemed to close in around us. As we hiked, the sounds of the forest grew muted, and a thick fog began to roll in, blanketing the trees in an eerie haze. The sight of the waterfall cascading into a hidden pool was worth every step, though. We spent the afternoon swimming and lounging on the rocks, listening to the roar of the water and the eerie silence of the forest. It was as if time had slowed down, and we had all the time in the world to just be together. However, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Several times I thought I saw movement out of the corner of my eye, shadows flitting between the trees. Emma seemed to sense it too. "It's probably just animals," she said, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. Our nights were filled with laughter and deep conversations. We played board games by candlelight and took late-night walks along the lake, the moonlight guiding our way. One night, we even built a small campfire on the shore and roasted marshmallows, reminiscing about our childhoods and dreaming about our future. But there was always an unsettling silence in the forest, as if we were not entirely alone. The crackling of the fire seemed to echo unnaturally, and the surrounding darkness felt almost palpable. On our last day, a storm rolled in, and we spent the day inside, listening to the rain pounding on the roof and the wind howling through the trees. We read books, cuddled under a blanket, and made hot chocolate, savoring the coziness of the cabin. As the storm raged outside, I felt a profound sense of contentment mixed with unease. I realized that it wasn't just the beautiful surroundings that made this trip special, it was sharing it all with Emma, even with the strange, haunting atmosphere of the place. That night, as the storm continued to rage, we heard a series of loud, unexplainable noises outside the cabin. It sounded like something heavy being dragged through the underbrush, followed by a soft, rhythmic tapping against the wooden walls. Emma and I exchanged nervous glances, our previous sense of adventure giving way to genuine fear. "Maybe it's just a branch," I suggested, though I didn't believe it myself. We peered out the window but saw nothing in the darkness except the rain lashing against the glass. Trying to calm our nerves, we decided to make some tea. As we waited for the water to boil, the tapping grew louder, more insistent. It moved from one side of the cabin to the other, like something or someone was circling us. Emma grabbed my hand. "Let's just stay inside until morning," she whispered. We huddled together on the couch, listening to the storm and the mysterious sounds outside. Eventually, exhaustion overcame our fear and we fell asleep, though it was a fitful, uneasy sleep. When we woke the next morning, the storm had passed and the world outside was eerily calm. We cautiously stepped onto the deck, half expecting to find signs of an intruder. Instead, we found nothing but rain-soaked ground and the usual forest debris. The strange noises from the night before were left unexplained, adding to the eerie atmosphere of our stay. Leaving the cabin was bittersweet. As we packed up and drove away, I took one last look at Lake Crescent, now calm and serene after the storm. The week had been a perfect blend of adventure and relaxation, but more importantly, it had brought Emma and me closer than ever, despite, or maybe because of, the eerie ambiance that had enveloped us. We returned to our daily lives, but the memories of that week stayed with us. Whenever I feel overwhelmed or stressed, I think back to our time at the cabin by Lake Crescent and remember the peace and happiness we found there, mingled with the haunting beauty of the forest. And I know that no matter what life throws our way, we'll always have that special place and the love we shared there, lingering like a ghostly whisper in the back of our minds. But sometimes, late at night, I find myself lying awake, wondering what exactly was out there in the darkness, watching us. The cabin by Lake Crescent remains a beautiful memory, but also a haunting one, a reminder that there are still mysteries in the world, some of which are better left unexplored. In the hustle and bustle of city life, the idea of spending a weekend alone in a secluded cabin by Lake Erie seemed like a perfect escape. The notion of tranquility and solitude was too appealing to resist. So, on a cool Friday afternoon, I packed my bags, hopped in my car, and began the long drive to the cabin. The road grew narrower and more isolated as I ventured deeper into the forest, with the dense trees forming a canopy overhead. By the time I reached the cabin, the sun was setting, casting a golden glow across the lake's serene surface. As I stepped out of the car, a sudden chill ran down my spine. The air was crisp and cool, and the silence was almost oppressive. The only sounds were the gentle lapping of the lake's waves against the shore and the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze. Shaking off the unease, I grabbed my bags and headed inside. The cabin was charming and rustic, just as the photos had promised. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, surrounded by cozy, well-worn furniture. Large windows offered a breathtaking view of the lake, their panes reflecting the last light of the day. I lit a fire and made myself a cup of tea, settling into an armchair to relax. As darkness fell, the temperature inside the cabin dropped, and I threw another log on the fire, savoring the comforting warmth. Later that night, feeling restless, I decided to take a walk along the lake. The full moon hung high in the sky, its silvery light reflecting off the water in a mesmerizing display. As I strolled along the shore, I noticed something odd, a set of footprints in the sand, leading from the water up to the cabin. At first, I thought they were my own, but they were too large and spaced too far apart. A chill crept up my spine, but I dismissed it as paranoia and continued my walk. Back inside the cabin, I locked the door and checked all the windows, a lingering sense of unease gnawing at me. I tried to lose myself in a book, but my mind kept drifting back to those footprints. Eventually, I gave up and went to bed, hoping that a good night's sleep would clear my head. I woke in the middle of the night to the sound of whispering. At first, I thought it was the wind, but the whispers grew louder and more distinct, seeming to come from just outside the window. My heart pounded as I crept over and peered through the glass. The moonlight bathed the lake in an eerie glow, but there was no one there. The whispers continued, unintelligible but persistent. I tried to ignore them and went back to bed, pulling the covers over my head. Sleep was elusive, and I lay there, listening to the whispers that ebbed and flowed like the tide. At some point, I must have drifted off because I woke to complete silence. The whispers had stopped, but the sense of unease remained. The next morning, I found more footprints around the cabin, as if someone had been pacing all night. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I spent the day exploring the woods, trying to distract myself, but the unease clung to me like a shadow. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig had my heart racing. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the whispers started again. This time they were closer, more insistent. Determined to find the source, I grabbed a flashlight and ventured outside. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the path to the lake. As I approached the shore, the whispers grew louder, almost frantic. But despite the intensity, I couldn't decipher a single word. I stood there for what felt like hours, scanning the area with my flashlight, but I saw nothing. Frustrated and unnerved, I returned to the cabin, locking the door behind me. I decided I had enough. I packed my things, determined to leave first thing in the morning. But as I was packing, I found something that froze me in my tracks. A small, damp handprint on the windowsill. It was too small to be an adult's, yet too large for a child's. I stared at it, my heart racing, as the whispers grew louder, filling the cabin with their eerie presence. I didn't wait until morning. I grabbed my keys and fled to my car, not daring to look back. As I sped away, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw a figure standing by the lake, watching me leave. It was indistinct, a shadowy silhouette, but I knew it was the source of the whispers. The drive back to the city was a blur. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see that figure following me. When I finally reached home, I felt a strange mix of relief and lingering fear. The city, with all its noise and chaos, suddenly felt comforting. I never returned to that cabin by Lake Erie. Even now, I can't forget those haunting whispers and the feeling of being watched. Sometimes, late at night, I think I hear faint whispers outside my window, and I wonder if whatever was by the lake followed me home. Months later, I shared my experience with a friend who had grown up near Lake Erie. His face grew pale as I described the whispers and the footprints. He told me about the local legend of a young boy who had drowned in the lake many years ago. People claimed his restless spirit wandered the shores, whispering to those who dared to stay by the lake. The story chilled me to the bone, but it also brought a strange sense of closure. Maybe the whispers were his way of reaching out, seeking help or companionship. Or perhaps they were a warning, urging me to leave before something worse happened. Either way, I heeded the warning, and I've never returned to Lake Erie. The experience left me with an indelible mark, a reminder of the thin veil between the known and the unknown. Whenever I crave solitude, I choose places where the whispers of the past can't reach me, places where the silence is merely that, silence, and not the echo of lost souls.